Welcome to the Dynasty Deep Dive, where we go beyond the surface into depths unknown. I've got a very special guest today, Corey from the Fantasy Stock Exchange. You can find him on X at Football Stock. And we're going to be talking about rookies you need to stock up on in rookie drafts. No pun intended. So let's get straight into it, Corey. One of the guys that I saw you guys are pretty high on is Cam Skattebo. So can you talk to me about where he ranks for you among the rookies in this running backs in this class and why you're so excited about him?
Yeah, so over on our site, we have a prospect model. And the prospect model that I designed for the running back and wide receiver position last year, it's made with the kind of intent that the stuff that prospects do well translate to fantasy, because there's plenty of, NFL draft analysts out there that will talk about things that don't necessarily really matter for fantasy football purposes. For example, Cam Skattebo is an extremely good receiver. He has very, very good numbers across the board when it comes to, his best season yards per team, or yards per reception, or receiving yards market share, and all these kind of metrics. Cam Skattebo is going to rank very highly in that. So the model suggests that he has RB1 upside based on a lot of his receiving production, his size, a number of other factors. What I love about Cam Skattebo as well is what he does on tape. He's exceptional contact balance, great footwork for a big back, great receiving production, like I said, and receiving traits. And the cons about him necessarily are not fantasy things that really matter. I mean, it's great to have 4.3 speed, but you don't need it. It's not required to be a good fantasy running back. We see fantasy running backs, James Conner, Le'Veon Bell, David Montgomery, Josh Jacobs. I can name a million of them that don't have more than, mid 4.5 to low 4.6 type of speed. So the key is to just not be unbelievably slow at the running back position. And Cam Skattebo, his only real knock that you hear from a lot of people is that he doesn't have great speed. And he pretty much has everything else that he needs to have to be a great fantasy running back. And most NFL draft scouts, I would expect to probably value him as like a second or a third round running back. And from a fantasy, hit rate standpoint, that's perfectly good for us to be able to draft him in rookie drafts. So right now he currently ranks as my RB7 in the class. I have that big 5 group that pretty much everybody has up there. And I do have Byshal Tuten from Virginia Tech just ahead of Cam Skattebo, but he is right in that tier. There's a couple of guys in that range for me.
Awesome. Yeah, I didn't know you had Tuten that high. That's interesting. I also saw one of the things on your website was like college fantasy points per game. And I thought that was an interesting metric to dig deeper into. Second all time in your database behind Ashton Genty, and 4 of the top 20 from that metric are in this class. So what an exciting class. When I watch Cam Skattebo, I think about like OG Kareem Hunt, his rookie year, almost like just carrying people into the end zone. To your point, incredible contact balance. I know certain people shy away from player comps, but do you have one for Skattebo?
Yeah, my comp for him is not, I guess it's not a perfect comp because size-wise, they're not exactly the same player, but they're just the player he reminds me of as far as his skill set is. He kind of just reminds me of a much more well put together version of Kyren Williams.
Ooh, I like that. Like a bigger, probably, I would say less fumbling, but I know that Skattebo had a little bit of fumble issues too, but I see it. I see what you're saying there, where he doesn't need that home run speed to be incredibly productive for fantasy. So I like that comp. I talked about how 4 of the people in that database in the top 20 for college fantasy points per game are coming out of this class at running back. This is almost a layup question. Do you think that this is a historic running back class in the making?
Yeah. So the model goes back to 2016, and the only class that was better was the historic 2017 class, as far as the amount of, generational prospects it produced. 1, Christian McCaffrey, the amount of workhorse prospects in the model that it produced. 2, Leonard Fournette and Joe Mixon. Like when you stack up the tiers of prospects that we're getting in this class actually projects to be quite a bit deeper even than 2017 was as prospects. Now, of course, we know post-draft, we had Chris Carson's and Jamal Williams and Aaron Jones kind of emerged, from day 3 as really, really good options. But the model suggests that this 2025 class is both pretty good at the top with, Gentry and Hampton ranking as the top two backs in the model, and also pretty deep, especially when you consider, that a lot of the time these prospect grades are based on draft capital. Like I have, for example, pulled their NFL mock draft database projected draft capital. So, for example, Raheim Sanders, who's a prospect we'll probably talk about a little bit later, is projected to go 230th in the NFL draft. If the NFL agrees that this class is really solid and is really deep, and we see 20, 25 running backs go off the board in round 5 or earlier, then these grades would actually go up even a little bit more. So lots of really solid prospects in this class, lots of role players. I wouldn't be shocked if 5-10 years down the road, we got an RB2 or better season out of 12, 13, 14 of these guys.
Yeah, that's exciting, man. And I think people will talk to their blue in the face about the running backs. I certainly want to spend some time talking about the awesome work you do with wide receivers. But let's hang on the running backs for just a second. Kaleb Johnson, TreVeyon Henderson, I know they had similar scores in your prospect model. Do you have one that you prefer, and why so?
So I like them both. I like them both depending on where they go. I would say in a vacuum, I like TreVeyon Henderson more. He is ranked higher for me. And part of that is, again, what matters for fantasy is what he does better than Kaleb Johnson. He is a better receiver than Kaleb Johnson. Everybody and their mother raves about his pass protection, his ability to stay on the field on all 3 downs. And unlike Kaleb Johnson, he has speed to break away long runs. And he did that plenty of times. He 7 yards per carry last year in college football. So Henderson is the guy of the two of them that I prefer for sure, but he is more scheme specific than Kaleb Johnson is. I think all 32 NFL GMs would know how to use Kaleb Johnson. Whereas TreVeyon Henderson, there's a select few landing spots that could use running back talent. For example, the Chicago Bears has been brought up as, he could be the Jahmyr Gibbs and Ben Johnson's offense. The Denver Broncos as the Joker role or whatever for Sean Payton. He, of course, notoriously used Alvin Kamara very strongly for a number of years. Those two landing spots specifically, and TreVeyon Henderson could also go back with Chip Kelly in Las Vegas, who used them really well at Ohio State. There's a couple of spots I like Henderson in, and he's not a perfect fit in every single spot. But if he does go to one of those 3 landing spots specifically, I feel really good about his projection.
I haven't heard a lot of steam about him to the Raiders, but I really like that thought process of, reunite him with a former coach, knows what he brings to the table. He's a high character guy. When I was at the combine, I asked him, do you want to be a 3-down back? And obviously the answer was yes, right? Which I don't think he will necessarily be, but I don't think he needs to be. I think that Jahmyr Gibbs-esque role would be really nice for him. 15 touches a game, high value touches, right? Screen passes, outside runs, to kind of be the yin and yang with a power running back. He's no slouch between the tackles, but slightly undersized for that every down role. But I agree with you, a guy I'm tremendously high on just because of his ability to hit home runs and be extremely explosive on a per touch basis. So thanks for spending a minute with me on those guys. Let's get a little bit deeper into the running back class. A guy that I really like, and I know you've kind of pounded the drum for on your X account, Rocket Sanders. You'd mentioned him, Raheim Rocket. Is he one of your favorite sleepers at running back?
Yeah, the answer to my favorite sleepers at running back is yes, because there's 10 that are good. Right. But the reason I do like Raheim Sanders is when you fantasy to me is just a game of range of outcomes for the most part. None of us know what's actually going to happen with these guys. Raheim Sanders could wash out of the league in 3 years for all I know. But what happens if he doesn't? What happens if Raheim Sanders is really good at the NFL level and recaptures his 2022 form when all of us in the Dynasty Devy community thought he was going to be the 101 in 2024, or at least the RB1 in 2024? It was TreVeyon Henderson, Raheim Sanders, Braylon Allen was in the mix. I had Trey Benson as my RB1 going into that 2023 college football season. There was a number of different guys that were kind of in the mix for that top running back, and Raheim Sanders was one of them. Has a horrible 2023 season. Arkansas is a complete joke. He is banged up most of the year. He comes back in 2024, quietly has a nice bounce back season for South Carolina. He has 4.46 speed at 220 pounds, and he's actually quite fluid in open space as a receiver. it's not just a guy that can carry the ball 200 times a season. I actually genuinely think my comp for him was Ramondre Stevenson with like 4.45 speed, because Ramondre Stevenson ran a 4.6 at the combine and he wasn't a very fast prospect, but Raheim Sanders has more speed than Ramondre Stevenson. And Ramondre Stevenson, you guys might be like, is that really a good running? Ramondre Stevenson finishes an RB1 in 2022. Like, he was a very productive running back, at least for that calendar year in 2022 for the Patriots. So if you got Ramondre Stevenson's career out of Raheim Sanders with a 3rd-round rookie pick or whatever, you'd probably feel really, really good about that. So again, when I look through all of everybody's favorite sleepers, everybody's got a favorite sleeper running back in this class. But a guy like Raheim Sanders, the reason he's appealing to me is if he hits, he has the size, the receiving traits, the speed to really hit big. He's not a 11 fantasy point per game hit if he hits at the next level. He's a 15 to 17 point per game hit.
Yeah, he's got goal line upside, right? Tremendous size. Got an interesting player comp for him, and that is Carlos Hyde. I thought that was kind of interesting. To your point, maybe a little more upside than Carlos Hyde, but Carlos Hyde had a minute. He had a moment.
And multiple RB1 seasons. I would say Carlos Hyde's career is also very good range of outcomes for him.
Right, and that 91st percentile speed score, that'll play, right? And to your point, I think something that people don't really give him enough credit for is his receiving chops. Can you speak a little bit more on those?
Yeah, in the model, Raheim Sanders posted a best season PFF receiving grade of 81.2, which is like an 83rd percentile number. And when you stack that up among running backs that usually score well as receivers, he's not the size profile of those guys.
Right.
Usually you get a receiving profile of like LaQuint Allen or something like that when you see a guy with a high receiving grade on PFF. I believe he had the highest receiving grade in this class outside of Genty's 2023 season. So you're looking at a guy who stacks up really well in terms of reception market share. He, meets the mark there. Receiving yards per team pass attempt meets the mark there. 13.9% career targets per route run. He meets the mark there. Like, he checks that box, which is not something you can say about bigger running backs most of the time.
Yeah, 6'2", 225. I mean, I know there are fantasy managers watching who like a big running back. And if you're not fully hip on Raheim Sanders and what he brings to the table, we both encourage you, Corey and I, to do a little more research on this guy, because he's a guy, like, the price is damn near free. And if the draft capital is what they're predicting, he could go undrafted, for goodness sakes, in rookie drafts, right? And so this is a guy who I think has a lot of upside and is a deep sleeper. And I love spending a minute on those guys that people like you who do the homework say, hey, there's something there, right? So thanks for taking a dive into him with me. Let's take a few minutes to talk about your wide receiver rankings. But first, I'm going to roll a quick promo.
Rookie. It's all about rookie talk in fantasy football right now. So why not go use all that knowledge to do something other than a mock draft? Chris Jimino won $8,000 with just 2 teams last year, and each draft took 5 minutes. That's pretty good ROI. You can start doing rookie drafts for money today on Fast Draft. The Origins tournament is live. It is the place to go and monetize your knowledge of rookies and use your favorite Player Profiler host promo code for a $25 deposit match. Now let's go start drafting faster.
I've got a strong amount of Raheim Sanders in my rookie Origins drafts. Don't have as much TreVeyon Henderson as I'd like. He's been going in the top 5 most of those drafts, and there's no positional requirements. So like Cam Ward, Sanders is usually going after TreVeyon Henderson. So I think the community is pretty astute on the upside that a guy like TreVeyon can bring to the table. So let us get in, like I said, to your wide receiver class, because one of the things that really turned me on to you as a fantasy expert was some of the work you've done in years past on just like, you said something that really stuck with me, like the model, the evidence, the data is out there in what predicts a good wide receiver. Like, it's at our hands. Don't be overly slow. It's a good thing if you're more than 6 feet, right? And this guy ran a solid 40 time at his pro day, is definitely over 6 feet. and that's Tet McMillan. So, people are all over the place on this guy. So I think it's worth spending a minute on him. I know you're still kind of tweaking your model post combine, but he's going to be up there. He's going to be one of the top wide receivers you have in your model since 2016. So my question to you is, like, why do you like him? And do you think he can be a top 12, a wide receiver one in fantasy football at the next level?
Yeah, the whole point of the model is to filter out narratives and to filter out, we kind of get prisoner of the moment each draft class, for good or bad. Sometimes we underrate prospects because it's a good wide receiver class. Sometimes we overrate prospects because it's a bad wide receiver class. And the same applies to every position. But I think the thing that is going underrated with Tet McMillan is when you just line up the boxes, because like you said, we have the roadmap. We know how to predict wide receivers. Again, is it a perfect process? No. There's going to be N'Keal Harry's. There's going to be guys that seemingly stack up pretty well who don't work out for one reason or another. Usually it's because, they don't have what it takes above the shoulders. And there's absolutely no way I could possibly account for that in the model. So again, do all your research and all that. But at the same time, you stack up a guy like Tet McMillan. Okay, Power 5 school, check. Big, 6'4", 6'5", 219 pounds, check. Didn't run that slow, 4.48 to 4.55, depending on who you ask. Check. Again, you don't need to be a 4.3 guy to be a good NFL wide receiver. Then you stack up how he produced in college, especially knowing that he alpha Jacob Cowing as a true sophomore. Jacob Cowing, a 4th-round draft pick to the San Francisco 49ers, and Tanner McLaughlin, I believe, was a 5th or a 6th-round pick to the Cincinnati Bengals. So he had 2 actual NFL draft capital players on his team, and as a true sophomore, completely alpha those guys. Tet McMillan has the size, the speed, the athleticism to be a very solid wide receiver. The film backs it up. When you watch him, he is able to create separation. He is able to work off of press coverage at a very high level. He has exceptionally good yards after catch ability for a receiver of his size, which is not something that you see every day. The model's comps for him are Drake London and Rome Odunze, and I would actually argue that he's better after the catch than both of those players, even if Drake London and Rome Odunze specifically might have been better route runners than him or more nuanced, polished route runners than him coming out of school. So for me, I look at a guy who ranks literally 5th in my prospect model since 2016. Only Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison, CeeDee Lamb, and Jamar Chase were better prospects according to the prospect model. Again, I'm not following a verbatim necessarily, but it just points to the underlying truth that people saying that he's like wide receiver 5 in this class or wherever he's, in the public mind right now, and he should fall to the 2nd round when the model's like, no, he's probably should be a top 15 pick based on what the model thinks. Like Drake London was a top 10 pick, Rome Odunze was a top 10 pick, and he's ranked just ahead of both of those players.
Yeah. So I want to say that your answer is yes, that he has that ability, that upside to be a top 12 wide receiver, which is kind of a hot take, man, because like wide receivers, again, hard position to predict. I brought a couple people on the show and asked them that question. Their answers have been no. I'm kind of on your camp of like, you just got to look at the production, the missed tackles forced, to your point, his ability after the catch, his game speed, right? Like there's so much to like about this guy. Where would be your favorite landing spot for Tet?
There's a couple landing spots that I like. And just as an overarching thing here, I think there's 3 receivers in this class that can be wide receiver 1s on a median range of outcomes or slightly higher than a median range of outcomes. Travis Hunter, Tet McMillan, and Emeka Egbuka to me are the guys that can be wide receiver 1s in fantasy because of what they do well. Now, Luther Burden, if he develops, could be a wide receiver 1, but I have a little bit of concern on that. Tet McMillan, to me, I look at across the board where he could go and what would be like the best landing spots for him. I don't think he'll go as high as 4, but the best landing spot for him is the New England Patriots. I doubt he'll go that high. Maybe New England gets out of that pick, they trade down, whatever, and they take him at that point. I also do think he would be an excellent fit for Carolina. Now, would they take another receiver in the 1st round after trading up for Xavier Legette last year? Not exactly sure, but I also think he would be a great fit there. As far as realistic range of outcomes where it sounds like NFL draft scouts are projecting him, the best 2 landing spots for me are the Denver Broncos because he can play probably an early big slot role year 1 as he gets more polished and more nuanced as a route runner. And then year 2 and beyond can take over as the number 1 receiver there. And Cortland Sutton is a good receiver, capable enough to take away number 1 coverage, take away number 1 corners. That to me is probably the best landing spot for him, although I would say it's the best landing spot for Emeka Egbuka as well. But I also do think it's very possible he goes 12th overall to the Dallas Cowboys and works opposite CeeDee Lamb and can be the number 2 receiver in a very pass-heavy offense for a quarterback who can definitely support both of those dudes. Obviously, CeeDee Lamb is going to cap his upside probably for the rest of his career or however long he's there for. But at the same time, I mean, McMillan would be a great fit there.
I love those. I'm a big Denver Broncos fan. Almost every mock you see is us either getting a running back or a wide receiver. There was a lot of Colston Loveland before we signed Evan Ingram. Just something about Sean Payton gives me the willies where he's like, no, we'll make it work with these undrafted free agent wide receivers. Like, we'll be just fine. But that'd be awesome to get a guy like him who, I'd probably want to get a jersey right away. I do want to dig in. This wasn't on the show sheet, but you said it. Concern around Burden. Can you elaborate?
Yeah, and the one thing on Sean Payton, too, is he absolutely loves size at receiver, too. So he's going to love that about McMillan. The concern I have with Burden is primarily film related, but it does show up across his profile as well. Because if you just, and the prospect model does favor some metrics, best season numbers, some metrics are career numbers. And anything best season, Burden's going to pop like crazy because his 2023 season, his sophomore year at Mizzou was unbelievable. I mean, you can make the argument legitimately he was the 3rd best receiver in college football behind maybe 4th best receiver in college football behind Malik Neighbors, Marvin Harrison, Rome Odunze in 2023.
Right.
He was that good. And his success was predicated on him cleaning up some of the things that he still had to clean up. Because when I watched his 2023 tape with the context that he was a 19-year-old true sophomore, you're like, man, you get really excited about this guy because right now, okay, he's playing a little bit too much in the slot. He's getting a little bit of Mickey Mouse work and whatnot. Right. But as a junior, hopefully they put him on the outside a little bit more. They let him run a little bit more of a nuanced route tree because that just naturally happens with a lot of college football wide receivers. They start out, get the ball in their hands by any means possible. As their career goes along, they start to develop more of a nuance to their game. And that just didn't happen with Burden this year. So I think what a lot of Burden defenders would say, it's like, well, the quarterback play was bad this year. It's like, well, it was the same quarterback he had in 2023. And Theo Weiss Jr. outproduced him this year, which is a significant problem as far as what it means for his production profile. And it's not that Luther Burden had less yards, less catches, less touchdowns than he did in 2023. My problem is the questions I had about his 2023 tape got worse in 2024, not better.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. I hold out hope that a lot of that was just them trying to figure out ways to, work with Brady Cook or something does not add up. I think anybody would agree with that. But, watching the guy, I think he pops at certain points, right down the field when they did deploy him. He just doesn't seem like a guy who needs to be just a gadget guy, but that seems like what they wanted to kind of slot him in there as. But I get what you're saying. He should have stepped up and kind of graduated into a more, big boy wide receiver role. And he didn't. He just didn't. Right. So thanks for spending a minute with me on that. This guy is really fun to talk through because we talked about Tet being all the way down at wide receiver 5. This guy, some people think is wide receiver 1 because he ran fast in tights. But your grade is basically a full fade on him relative to, where he's going in rookie drafts, where the NFL is going to take him. And that's Matthew Golden. So can you talk to me a little bit more about why he came so low on your model? I can imagine it's due to lackluster production. And if he's on your do not draft list.
Yeah, so I mean, he's going to miss a lot of the production marks, for example, career yards per route run, best season yards per route run, targets per route run, target share per game. I mean, when you're a projected first-round pick and your best season target share was 19% and your breakout age is 20.9, your PPR points per game and your best season is 13.2, it's hard to trust your ability to be a fantasy receiver 1. However, I will say as a Longhorns fan, we did rely on him a lot more down the stretch. And he became the wide receiver 1 by the end of the season. And as a transfer, you don't know how the season would have played out differently had that been the case the whole year. Because, Texas beating the shit out of every single team that they play against for the first 8-10 weeks of the season until they start playing college football playoff games and SEC championship games and all that kind of stuff, because they're just superior to every team that they play against for most of the year. So you don't get a full scope of what Matthew Golden could have been, because he's playing a part-time role in a team that's blowing everybody out for the first couple of weeks of the year. So I will say my film takeaway from Matthew Golden is that I definitely get it. I definitely get why people are saying this could be the wide receiver one in this class. And I get why people are saying the separation ability is there. He's a natural hands catcher. He's a technician, has great downfield usage. He's really solid after the catch. My issues with him on film were, the physicality maybe needs to be amped up a little bit. There was a couple of drops. I think zone coverage wise, he doesn't have great awareness and feel for it yet. But he did have good feel for man coverage, obviously. And then the biggest blemish, the biggest red flag on his profile is he was hurt in 2023 for Houston. You don't know how he would have produced that year. This year, wasn't a full-time player until midway through the season. We don't know how he would have produced in 2024 with Texas had maybe he been at the school since 2023 or whatever. And I don't want anybody to come out here and be like, oh, well, Isaiah Bond was actually the number one. Trust me, he wasn't. It's not any of that. It's Golden's a solid prospect. He's wide receiver 5 for me in the class right now. I have him ranked just about around the 1-2 turn, depending on tight end premiums and how many quarterbacks we get in the first round. And does Travis Hunter play wide receiver full time? I would say earliest I could see somebody taking him is like 109 to 110. Lowest I could see him going is like 201, 112 kind of area.
Yeah, I mean, he's a solid player. He's but I think he just kind of jumped the shark lately, right? In terms of vaulting up above in certain people's prospect rankings, above guys like Tet McMillan. But to your point, he was leaned on down the stretch. There's a data point I found that was something along the lines like, throughout the most of the season, he was around 1.5 yards per route run. But then down the stretch when it mattered in those final games in the college playoffs, he was around 3 yards per route run, right? Yeah. So that's the type of stuff that he is just a tough evaluation. But I think he's one of those guys that he's a good player. Everybody can see that, but he's probably a better real life wide receiver than he is a fantasy wide receiver.
Yeah, he's this year's lad. That's what it is. And I was huge on McConkey last year. Like I loved McConkey. He was one of my highest rated. I had him wide receiver 6 in a tier with BTJ and Worthy last year. And you had to piece together his profile too. You had to be like, okay, well, in these games when he was healthy, he looked really good. And, obviously his underlying metrics were better than Golden. So it made it a little bit easier of a case because he had, like a high yards per route run and those kind of things. But I think both of them, there's a reason Golden's comp in the model is Ladd McConkey, is because the film is good and you can see that and it's very evident. And I kind of disagree with the point that if he hits, he's not really that good from a real life standpoint. I think the 4.29 has clouded some people a little bit to the point that he's like a Henry Ruggs type of prospect. Like, I don't even really think their skill sets are all that similar, to be honest. Yeah. I actually think he's a lot more similar to McConkey, who also is a really good athlete too, where if he hits, it's going to look like he's a short, intermediate area PPR guy that can rack up, 100 catches. And that is good for fantasy. So for me, I do actually quite like Golden at cost. I'm not going to go crazy and take him over Burden or take him over Emeka Egbuka or take him over Tet McMillan. Burden's the one guy that if one guy gets a bad landing spot, one guy gets a good landing spot, I could maybe flip him over. I may be a little bit higher on Golden from I'm seeing what the model's telling me. I'm seeing what the NFL draft community is telling me. But when I form my own opinion on Matthew Golden, I'm like, yeah, this is a guy that is a very viable late first round rookie pick to me.
Yeah, I think he'll go in the first round in the draft, right? And draft capital is ultimately like the most indicative thing. That's the best data point we have to predict fantasy production. I found the stat I was looking for. So through week 14 in 2024, 1.66 per yards per route run, 16% targets per route run, 48 yards per game. The last 4 games of the season against Clemson, Georgia, Arizona State, and Ohio State, 3.37 yards per route run, 24% targets per route run, and 102.8 yards per game. So that's just something that I think, to your point, you have to weave it all together and say the career production is suspect, but if we're looking at when they leaned on him and who that level of competition and that production, that kind of, is maybe gives you one reason to want to toss some models out, or kind of, overlook what is going to drag him down based on his career production. So, interesting discourse on him. I think he's still such a tough guy to wrap your arms around in terms of like, is he it, But I think as long as, to your point, if he's fallen outside the top 5 or 6 wide receivers in rookie drafts, then he's 100% wheels up. But I have a feeling in fantasy drafts that almost every home league you play in, they're going to want to get the guy who ran fast and tights. You know what I mean? So
I mean, maybe. I personally, I'm comfortable taking him as the 3rd best receiver in the class, excluding Travis Hunter, 4th best if Travis Hunter plays wide receiver full time, assuming he gets a better landing spot at capital than Burden gets. Personally, I think there's enough of a qualm with either prospect. I think Golden is somewhere between Adonai Mitchell and Ladd McConkey. Which one is he closer to? To me, I think it's Ladd McConkey.
Okay. Yeah. I rest in peace, Adonai Mitchell, man. I can't just get it. Like, I think I liked him as a prospect, but just tough when you get a landing spot with like Anthony Richardson throwing you the ball,
Yeah. And the model didn't like Mitchell, by the way. It's not like these guys were comparable prospects in the model. The model really didn't think Mitchell was very good.
Interesting. Well, let's go a little bit deeper into this class. A guy that I really like, I know you've posted some propaganda on is Tory Horton. So he's a bit deeper down, right? You're going to see him probably at the 3-4 turn in rookie drafts, probably be a guy that hopefully can get 4th round NFL draft capital, maybe a little later. I wouldn't be too surprised if he slipped a little bit just because he's dealt with some injuries, but performed well at the combine. Is he a guy that you would consider one of your favorite wide receiver sleepers? And if not him, then who would it be?
Yeah, I mean, there's a nice group of guys, I think, that are going to be just 3rd, 4th round staples. Tory Horton being one of them. I know Kyle Williams has gotten a lot of pub lately, but he's definitely going to be one of those guys as well. I'm still big on Xavier Restrepo. I know he ran slow, but he is not a 4.8 guy on film. Tez Johnson, again, I know he's small, but I'm willing to take the shot on him in like the 4th round of rookie drafts. Noel's getting a lot of pub lately. Royal's obviously been a sleeper for a lot of people. Besh is starting to get a lot of pub because his reception perception numbers were friggin' bonkers. But there's a lot of guys in this class. I think generally speaking, the wide receiver tier 3 to tier 4 players are just generally pretty undervalued this year because of how many good running backs we have. And also just because all of their profiles are not complete. Like there's something wrong with every single one of them. And a lot of the times it's because of like injury or who they were competing for targets with or whatever. With Tory Horton, his production profile would have been more complete had he come out last year, because this year he didn't really do anything. He had a couple games and then he got hurt and he was shut down for the season. Had he come out last year, he would have been a little bit more of a cleaner projection. He probably would have been like a 2nd or a 3rd round pick, but it also was a better receiver class last year. So it's all kind of up in the air. Tory Horton specifically, the skill set he brings to the table is that he can work downfield. He had multiple different roles at one program. Like at Colorado State in 2022 and in 2024 before he got hurt, he was more of a downfield receiver. But then in 2023, they used him like Malachi Corley, where they just like fed him targets at the line of scrimmage. So he kind of was multifaceted throughout every year of his college career, which is a really good thing, actually. You never want to see a guy do one thing his entire career and never do anything else. The fact that he was able to be a yak guy in 2023, but then also a downfield guy in 2022 is a good thing. It means that he can probably do a number of different things, especially given how he tested too. I didn't expect him to test quite that well, but it's important for his NFL draft capital that maybe this locks him in to a 3rd round pick or earlier in the actual NFL draft.
Yeah, he returned punts at CSU too, right? Like he was a guy that was clearly the best player on the field for them. It's not a great school, and people knew that he was the guy they had to stop, and they still couldn't stop him when he was healthy. So, yeah, he should have came out much earlier. He wanted to go to school and get his degree. I asked him, like, why didn't you come out 2 years ago? Because he could have come out as a junior and set the world on fire. And, his 5th year senior, those last 2 years were not quite what he did in his junior year. And I think, the analytics guys would love to see a junior declare as opposed to a 5th year. But that's kind of where I'm at with him, is like, imagine this guy came out as a junior, you know what I mean? And how high would you have been on him then? And as a guy who is rebounding from a serious knee injury, coming out and running low 4.4s, like I'm excited about him. So I have a lot of Tory Horton in my rookie origins drafts as well. And seems like a really good guy as well from what I picked up from him at the combine. So Let's close it out with just one question on tight ends. Who's your tight end one?
My tight end one is Colston Loveland.
Let's go!
Yeah, I think he's the best tight end receiving prospect in the class. Again, this is the one guy in the class that I will say Tyler Warren will be the better tight end in real life, because he is a much better blocker than Colston Loveland. I think that's an understatement. Like, Colston Loveland isn't just he knows how to do it. Like, that's what I heard DJ say this from NFL Network say, like, when you're standing on the table for a tight end who can't block, you always say, well, he can block if he has to, or he gets in the way of people or whatever. Like, Colston Loveland's a bad blocker. Let's call a spade a spade. He needs to learn how to block. And that's a problem. But at the same time, if he gets to a baseline level of, I'm not a complete liability at the NFL level, he is a much better receiver than Tyler Warren is, at least in my opinion. I think he has more nuanced routes. He's a more dominant feel for like zone coverage. His underlying metrics are excellent as far as how much of the Michigan offense he was actually commanding. You look at his actual box score, it's not very good, but they threw the ball for like 1,800 passing yards last year. So it was a terrible offense, and he was the whole thing. So I look at Tyler Warren, I'm like, okay, a fifth-year senior who didn't produce the first 4 years of his career and couldn't outproduce Brenton Strange and Theo Johnson. How is this guy a consensus top 8 prospect in this class? Like, to me, I just don't get it with Tyler Warren. I think he's a good prospect, but like, I'm working on the prospect model video for the tight end position right now. And the prospect model like tends to think that Tyler Warren is like Hunter Henry or Cole Kmet. Like, it's not anywhere near Trey McBride or, some tight end prospect that you may think Tyler Warren is being compared to.
And so where do you oh, sorry. I was going to say, where do you have like Loveland in terms of player comparison and who he's stacking up against?
So he, in the model, compares pretty favorably to like a Sam Laporta to anywhere. Like, it's weird. The tight end model is difficult because there's not as many of them since 2016, especially guys that have been drafted like highly in that range. But when you look at Colston Loveland, his best 2 comparisons are Sam Laporta and Tucker Kraft. And I think that's a good kind of range of outcomes for what he could be. I think on like the lower end, he's probably more like Tucker Kraft. On the higher end, he's more like Sam Laporta.
Yeah, I like it. I always throw out the Sam Laporta, not like play style comparison 100%, but just when you think about, they both played in an offense that likes running the rock, and they were the whole passing offense at tight end, right? And it's just one of those things where people were so high on Kincaid, they were so high on a guy like Michael Mayer, but then if you dig through like yards per team pass attempt, targets per route run, right? Like, these were things where Loveland is going to shine, and a guy like Laporta stood out as a diamond in the rough. I think the fantasy community as a whole is starting to get more hip on that concept, that it's not all about volume and it is about some of those underlying metrics. And that'd be my one pushback for you, man, on the blocking is like, yeah, he needs to improve, but they ran that ball a lot at Michigan, and he wasn't so much of a liability that they felt like they had to take him off the field, right? And so I love targeting tight ends who kind of are in that modern mold of like, he's not going to be an inline guy all the time. You can deploy him in the slot. I don't need my tight end playing as the H-back or as the Wildcat quarterback, right? I want him out there.
Seems like a Harold Fannin shot right there.
A little bit of a Tyler Warren shot too, right? Like, as a guy who's just a pure receiving threat, which is what we care about in fantasy football, receptions, yards, and touchdowns, I think he has the most upside in that regard. So, well, Corey, man, you've been an awesome guest. Thank you for joining me on the show. Can you just talk to people? You do a lot of different work, a lot of really great work, where they can find you on X and anywhere else they can kind of dig into your content more.
Yeah, I tweet nonsense on X at football stock. If you want to follow along for that. But most of my stuff is over on Fantasy Stock Exchange YouTube channel, TikTok stuff too. If you guys want to check out the TikTok page, there's some content over there, mainly during the regular season, but throwing out some NBA pick'ems and whatnot throughout this time of year because there's not a whole lot going on that front. And then everything like bonus content wise, if you're wondering where can I get these prospect models, where are my dynasty rankings, where are my superflex rankings, one quarterback, rookie rankings, all that kind of stuff, that is all available over on flockfantasy.com. Myself, Mason over at Fantasy Flock, Domain, Land, number of other bigger YouTube and dynasty channels. We all kind of teamed up to bring all of you guys like 4 Patreons in one, essentially. So if you guys do, follow multiple of us, maybe you've heard of some of those channels, watch a couple of their videos or whatever, by signing up over on Flock Fantasy, make sure to use our promo code FSE, to get 30% off, 7 days for free, 6 months annually when you sign up, and a free Dynasty team review voucher when you sign up annually as well. But you'll also get all of their bonus content. So if you follow them too, and you're like, hey, I wonder what their draft guide looks like, or I wonder what, their dynasty rankings look like. We also have a trade calculator, trade finder tools are my team's feature. You can load in your team and you can sort it by my rankings to see how I would grade your entire league, essentially. So that's actually a free tool. But if you want my specific opinion, you would need to be a paid subscriber. So lots of stuff going on over there. Tons of things that are coming around in the hopper too. Big updates to the wide receiver and running back prospect models with all the pro days done coming later this week, early next week. And then the tight end prospect model hopefully will be live before the NFL draft. And then Dynasty Rookie Draft Guide updated version 3.0 post-draft, probably the Saturday night or the Sunday morning after the draft. Everything will be updated. Yeah, man, you are an absolute workhorse in the industry. I love bringing on people like you who clearly put in the work. So thanks for joining. And to the viewers, if you like this, like it. If you have any questions for us, give us a comment and subscribe to the Player Profiler Now page, because I will be bringing on awesome guests like Corey all year long. So thank you for watching and good luck winning your fantasy league.